Let's turn our attention to the nationwide protest proposed by organized labor. Are Nigerians expecting a showdown tomorrow in the country as regards the protest called by organized labor over economic hardship and unmet demands? That's the big question we're asking on the show today. Labor, however, may not be united on this decision. We hear that Trade Union Congress is saying its members will not be participating in the planned protest scheduled for tomorrow and Wednesday, that's 27th and 28th of February. And this is according to President of the TUC, Festus Osifo. I'm joined by National Assembly correspondent Joke Adesa, who is live in our Abuja studio. Joke, precisely why is TUC opting out of this protest?
Thank you, Nifemi. I think TUC was even clear in answering that question. Its idea is that there was even no question of opting out in the first instance. If you look at the fact that it was a singular decision taken by the Nigeria Labour Congress. Yes, both congresses took the decision to give government a 14-day ultimatum, after which a nationwide strike will commence. But even before the expiration of that ultimatum, we saw the NLC come up with that notice of mass protest. And so what TUC was clear about at this event today was the fact that it was never part of the resolution coming from the NLC for a mass protest. It believes that over time, since October, that they had agreement with the government, they have been able to follow up, and government has been able to implement some of these agreements. For instance, it talks about the fact that out of the 16-point agreement, at least they are convinced that government, at least to an extent, is sincere in implementing this agreement. He spoke about the fact that, yes, after the October agreement, government kind of slowed down in paying the wage award of 35,000 naira. But when they mounted pressure, when both congresses mounted pressure, he said he could confirm that 4 months have been paid. It means that government is not indebted to any of its workers as far as wage award is concerned up till the end of January, meaning that they've paid up to the end of January. So you can only talk about February, which of course is about to end. And so that's for TUC, it was not part of that decision, and so it will not be participating in that protest tomorrow and Wednesday. That much came out from the TUC president today.
That's a live for us in Abuja. Joining me in the studio is public affairs analyst Nelson Akujimi. I also have joining us online legal practitioner Fred Nziako. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us on the program. I've heard your civil society organization saying that national protest isn't the way to go right now. Why did you take that position? Well, for obvious reasons anyways. I know that you support this administration, but some would say the Tinubu administration also needs some people to put it on its toes. Do you agree?
Yes, I agree. Absolutely. Government exists to better the lives of the people, and at all times, the government must be held accountable by the people. For me, I think Nigerians need to ask if the TUC and the NLC jointly had an agreement with the federal government. And from what we have seen, it means the TUC saying this protest was never part of our joint resolution. Then it means probably the NLC is pursuing another agenda. So for me, it's worrisome because a lot of Nigerians still recollect the role the NLC played in the last general elections, even the build-up to the election. So are we still in the season of politicking rather than governance? So that is the question I want Nigerians to ask the
But
NLC.
TUC agrees to the extent that Nigerians, according to TUC, the president, he was quoted to have said that Nigerians have not witnessed this level of hardship, adding that the problems are not unconnected to government's poor patronage of locally made products. So both unions seem to agree with the economic hardship that is currently ongoing, and NLC is clear as to that being the reason for this protest.
Well, there is no doubt that Nigerians are going through hard times. Anybody living in Nigeria saying otherwise, must be living somewhere else, and that is a fact. But what we are saying here is that If you have had an agreement with the other party, and out of the 3 or 4 of you that had that agreement, you are the only one saying you are pursuing a course of action that affects other people, it means you have other motives. Because whatever is affecting NLC members or the Nigerian people, I'm sure the members of TUC, they are not Americans or Britons. They are also Nigerians. So everybody is feeling it. But what we are saying here is that instead of going on this protest, there is need for us to have more constructive engagement. And that is exactly what the TUC is doing, that the TUC is making recommendations, what they feel should be done. I think Nigerians should even ask NLC, what are your own recommendations of how we can mitigate, this present economic challenge?
Fred Nziako has joined us via Zoom. Do you agree with Mr. Ekujumi that NLC has an ulterior motive here? And what do you make of the fact that both unions are not united as regards this nationwide protest?
Everybody has to answer his name. NLC is Nigerian Labour Congress. TUC is Trade Union Congress. They are not one and the same, even though they are all in the labour industry. So if TUC says they are not going on strike, that doesn't mean that NLC will also kowtow the line or follow the pathway of TUC. After all, NLC is the one that represents the masses, the majority of the masses of the people. TUC is essentially for senior staff, more or less, and the middle class. So if TUC feels comfortable not going on protest, then it doesn't mean that NLC should not go on protest. Don't forget that NLC is more or less an organized civil society organization, which represents both the organized labor and the artisans and those who have no voice in the labor industry and those who are being badly affected by the misgovernance or any challenge of governance in the country. So I do not think that TUC's position should affect NLC's position. Then secondly, this is not a labor-related issue alone. It's also an issue that has to do with living standard of the people of Nigeria. So more or less, this is a mass protest that should be peaceful, that should send signal to the government that Nigerians are suffering. Don't forget that in most cases, the masses of the people feel that those in government and in authority are in ivory towers, they are on the high horses.
I hear you clearly, Mr. Nziako. If you allow me to jump in quickly, do you agree to a sense that perhaps NLC carries a burden from its position in the last election that in a way affects its credibility in this matter?
I do not agree so. Making such statement is just to call the dog a bad name in order to hang it. Before the election, there was an NLC, and NLC has not changed its modus operandi. After the election, there is still an NLC, and it will continue to be a representative of the masses of the people, the working class, and the low cadre people of the country. So if anybody begins to say or tag the NLC protest with a brush of politics, that is not being hospitable enough. That is not being fair enough to NLC. Face the issue. The issue is that Nigerians are suffering. Even the government has agreed that Nigerians are suffering. As a matter of fact, I will even recommend that government officials should troop out tomorrow and next tomorrow to even join the protest, because this is a protest that would have taken place every day of Buhari's administration, because what we are seeing today is a backlash of the terrible misgovernance under the 8 years of President Muhammad Buhari.
There is the argument, Mr. Nziako, of how non-patriotic a national protest will be at this time, seeing the implication of possibly plunging the economic deeper, because it would mean that it will affect traffic, businesses will not open. Is there a sense to which you agree with that argument?
2 days of protest will not in Nigeria.
All right. Let me hear Mr. Ekujumi out here. What are the strategies outside protests? Because somebody has to also ask questions, right? And say, you know what? Mr. President said there is no excuse before this election. He knew what he was coming into. The story of, the previous administration plunged this economy was an open secret before this election. Now, I saw that.
Well, I think we must recognize that before the previous administration, there was also administrations before it. We had an administration in between 2011 to 2015, an administration that in 2014, the Minister for Finance came out publicly and said the government was borrowing to pay salaries. We also had that administration in which when the previous administration came into office on May 29, 2015, about over 12 states were owing backlog of salaries. So if you are talking about the previous administration, then I don't think we should limit the window to that. We should go back to administrations before that. We had an administration even before that in which the former president administration was alleged to have expended $16 billion of Nigeria's foreign forex on power. And what did we get in return? So I think we should start going back. Maybe we'll go back to 1960.
Okay, so I have...
Then we'll find where to lay the blame.
We lost contact with Mr. Ezeakoh earlier, but he's back now. Quickly, let's talk about how you think that this administration is tackling this particular challenge. Just yesterday, Mr. President set up a tripartite economic advisory committee to engage the federal government, subnationals, and indeed the private sector.
Yes, I was saying before I get to that I want to urge government officials to join the protest because it is a national protest. Nobody is happy with the state of affairs. And then that protestation will mean that we begin to ask questions. If we have to go back and asking questions, we should go do so. So far, the government of the day is making every effort to arrest the situation, but I can tell you that it is a very terrible economy that this government inherited. Without patronizing the government, I must admit that the government of President Bola Tinubu inherited a terribly bad economy. So much has been said about it, but the challenge is that when we were saying that Muhammadu Buhari was killing Nigeria's economy, they did not see it. And that is why Nigerians are calling out APC and the current government, because they kind of, if they had spoken, if they had allowed the protest under Buhari, if they had even joined the protest under Buhari, possibly there would have been a change of paradigm. Now we are trying to wake up a dead horse, and we need to do a lot to wake it up. That does not mean that we should not protest. We should protest, ventilate our grievances and our anger, and then go back to joining table, come back to the productivity center, and work towards productivity, towards enhancement of our economy. Right. But all hands must be on deck. But I can tell you that anything that government should do in order to put all hands on deck, they should do by first and foremost minimizing wastages in governance. That is one aspect that the current government has not looked at. Wastages in governance is still high, the bureaucracy is still bloated, and Nigerians are not seeing the effect of good
I hear you clearly, Mr. Ezeakoh. Interestingly, just today, we heard from the FEC meeting that the president has made a decision really to implement the Orosaye report, and that would mean merging, some departments and ministries as well as agencies of government. The concerns with that, 12 years ago, was that perhaps some people are going to lose their jobs. Now, consider the implication of that in this economy.
Well, we expect that there will be modalities for implementation of the Orosaye report implementation. And in doing that, one is, optimistic that the government will look at the pros and cons with regards to job security in order not to plunge, the well-being of the people deeper into economic challenges. So I don't expect that because they are going to merge these ministries, departments, and agencies. It doesn't mean that, automatically that people will lose their jobs. It could be the creation of more offices for, greater efficiency and what have you. So I want to believe strongly that the implementation of that report by the present administration, is enacting to the cries of, the duplication, of several agencies with same or similar functions, and in that way will limit, government expenses that people have continued to claim, is among us. Maybe when government does this, we'll be able to, do a comparison of where we were before and where we are now.
Mr. Ezeakoh, let me get your thoughts on, the decision to implement the Steve Orosaye report. We're hearing that agencies like NACA will now be merged with NCDC, and then, the National Theatre the NIPC rather will merge with NEPC, and the National Theatre will be merged with National Troupe of Nigeria, among other such mergers.
I can tell you that any effort by the government to streamline ministry, departments, and agencies for greater efficiency and especially for reduction in the cost of governance will be most welcome by all. We have been talking about it for a very long time. So if there's an executive order in that regard, that will be most welcome. And not only that, government should also look into the effects of profit and ensure that people do not earn more than they deserve, and ensure that also people should earn what they deserve. Some agencies of government earn very little, while others earn humongous amount of money, whereas they all contribute to the central productivity of the country. So while we clap for the government for looking into Orosoya report and making the best out of the situation, while being conscious of the issues about wages and employment situation in Nigeria, government must in any way try to create more jobs by ensuring that the infrastructure that will ensure job creation is enhanced.
All right, so both of you seem to have agreed on the fact that this administration, is taking the right step in the right direction. But people are concerned about the timeline, the speed at which this is being achieved. Because Mr. President came on the 29th of May to announce that subsidy has been removed. And then we saw some agreements between federal government and organized labor. Even TUC, the initial deadline was the 22nd of this month. How fast would you say government is in this regard to meet the agreements it had, or it made rather?
Well, I think with regards to those agreements, the position of TUC shows, reasonableness, because government, whether we want to admit or not, is not people by persons from, up there in the skies. They are human beings like you and I. And if they are going to implement decisions or implement agreements, they also have to walk through, the human mechanism. And, there are some things that are beyond the human mechanism. So, so long as government shows faith, like the TUC has rightly affirmed that the government has kept, to its word, then I think we can continue as citizens to encourage the government at all times, to keep their eyes on the ball and ensure that decisions reached are implemented.
We have 1 more minute to go, Mr. Ezeaku. Do you agree with him that this government is moving at just the right pace in meeting labor unions' requests and the agreement he had with them earlier?
If I may, it is the labor unions themselves that will know whether government is meeting the agreements or not. I am not privy to most of the agreements, but their constant refrain is that they kept shouting that government is not meeting up with the agreements, that government had made so many promises and the government had agreed with so many things and had been reneged in implementing them. And then if except they are not telling us the truth, or whether the government itself is not telling us the truth. But from all indications, they have been complaining that all the agreements, most of the agreements they reached with government have not been implemented by the government. And then there may be reasons why the implementation is either slow or be kept in the cooler. Part of the reasons, according to the government, is scarcity or paucity of funds. And that is why the Labour Congress has been saying that when there are scarcity of funds, that government should streamline and prioritize the order of preference, what to pay and what not to pay, what to execute and what not to execute. But when government does not prioritize their expenditure and then the labor is feeling the short end of the knife, you expect them to shout and they protest. That's exactly what we're seeing.
I'm afraid we've run out of time.
Yes. The protest of tomorrow is not related to labor alone. It is a national protest because of hunger in the land.
Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us on this conversation. Fred is a legal practitioner. Nelson Kujimi. You guys have been around for a while. I remember, we've been having this conversation since perhaps the days of Yaradua and what have you. And we're still saying the same thing. Absolutely. Hopefully it gets better in the coming years. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining us.
Many thanks.
You can watch it all over